Thank you and good morning.
Good morning.
First, I want to congratulate you. My youngest son, Jonathan, graduated from Plantation High in 1988.
Thank you.
And he went on to do well. He graduated from Florida A&M University and from University of Kansas. And he was for years the city manager of Longdale Lakes. And he also assistant city manager of Tamarack. And he's now head of water and wastewater for Broward County government. So he told me to let you all know that he, because of his education here, became successful in it. I was born in Sanford, Florida in 1936. And when I was born, we lived in the colored neighborhood, which was totally segregated. And I was born in Sanford, Florida, I say, but I was really born in a black settlement west of Sanford in a little section called Midway. And in the Midway, it was all black, and 99% of us had outdoor toilets and wooden houses, and we lived badly. And when I was growing up, I would walk to town, which is 3 miles to Sanford, and I'd pass all these beautiful white folks' houses. And I would say to myself, when I grow up, I'm going to get me a white folks' house with an indoor bathroom. And I'm very glad to say that I now have 8 indoor toilets. So, times have gotten better. I graduated from Coombs Academy, which was the high school for black students in Sanford, Florida, in Seminole County. All of the blacks were bused from various communities in Seminole County to Sanford to Coombs Academy. And they called it an academy. It was really a black high school. All black teachers, all black students. And I graduated in 1954, the same year that Brown versus Board of Education was decided in 1954. And that ruled separate but equal schools in the United States were really illegal. They were unconstitutional because they were separate but never equal. Now I had gone to nothing but black schools all my life, and my education had been unequal. The books we used when I was in school were hand-me-downs that were the white schools would use, and when they became obsolete, then they would give them to the black schools. And many of them had notes in them and pages torn out, but that's what we used, and we received an inferior education. When I graduated, I applied for, and I was accepted at Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University in Tallahassee, Florida. That school was formerly Florida Agricultural and Mechanical College for Negroes, and was formed in the 1800s to educate colored students in the state of Florida, and to keep them from trying to go to the white schools in the state of Florida. I graduated from FAMU in 1958. And I went into the Army for 2 years. And before I graduated, there was a guy named Virgil Hawkins who was teaching and working at Bethune-Cookman College in Daytona Beach, Florida. And in 1948, he filed a lawsuit to integrate higher education in Florida. His lifelong desire was to become a lawyer. And so he applied to the University of Florida Law School, and they denied him admission because he was black. But they said, if you want to go to an out-of-state northern law school, we'll pay your way. But Virgil said no, and he lost the case on the trial level, but appealed to the United States Supreme Court. And they ordered the state of Florida to integrate the school and allow Virgil to enter because he met all the qualifications. The state of Florida refused to allow him to enter. Virgil went back to court some 6 times, fighting the state of Florida in order to integrate higher education in Florida. Virgil won, but the powers that be, who were white, all white in Florida, would not allow him to enter the University of Florida Law School. They said, they gave him all kind of alternatives. They said, you will come and we'll rope off an area in the classroom for colored students. If you sit there, we'll let you come. And Virgil said no. So Virgil won, but they wouldn't let him go. Virgil compromised with the state of Florida. They said, we really don't like you because you're uppity. And they used some bad words in his face. But if you will withdraw your application, we will allow another black person to enter the University of Florida. Virgil then gave up his right to go to the University of Florida, to allow another black to go, and that black initially was George Stark from Sanford, Florida, my hometown. George went to University of Florida Law School for about a year and flunked out, or he said he just couldn't take it, that they were too mean and nasty to him. Then there was a young lady named Langston that entered the University of Florida Medical School. And she lasted less than a year, and she said they were too nasty. At the time they were matriculating at the University of Florida, I haven't graduated from Florida A&M University, and I was in ROTC, and I was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the United States Army, and I went through Army Intelligence School, and they made me a special agent for Army Intelligence and gave me a gun and a badge. And I asked to come back south, and they said, are you crazy? We're not gonna let a black person go south with a gun and a badge. You wouldn't live a week. So they sent me to California, and I was in Berkeley, California, when I read in Jet magazine that both blacks had flunked out of the University of Florida, and this was in 1960, early 1960. So I applied to the University of Florida Law School. And I also applied to University of California at Berkeley, and I applied to Harvard University, and I applied to Florida A&M University because they set up a law school there for blacks to keep blacks from going to the University of Florida. I was admitted, the first one was to University of California at Berkeley, and my wife was ecstatic because she said, let's stay in California, because that's our first experience living in an integrated setting and living where we wanted to and going to white restaurants. I mean, that was a big deal. And we were making good salaries. She's a registered nurse. So I said, well, let's wait. And then I heard from Harvard University, and I got admitted to Harvard. And she says, well, if we have to go to Massachusetts, it'd be my second choice. Where are we going? And I said, well, let's wait. And then I got a letter from the University of Florida. And I said, there are no blacks there. You and I can do this. We can integrate higher education in Florida if you will agree to go to Florida with me and help me. Reluctantly, she agreed to leave California, and we had an old, this was in 1960, we had an old 1951 Chevrolet Bel Air, no air conditioning. And so we drove from California to Gainesville. And we got there, and we had 3 kids. So I went to university housing for married students to apply for housing for my family. And they said, we don't have any housing. And I said, I know you have vacancies here. And he said, not for colored students. So they would not allow me to stay on campus. So I had to rent a house in Gainesville. I rented an apartment. And I went around and I talked to some of the deans and everybody and told them what had happened, that they were discriminating against me. I'm a full-time law student at the University of Florida, but they wouldn't let me live on campus because I was black. So they said they could do nothing about it. And so the wife and I went out and looked, and we put a down payment on a house in Gainesville. We bought a house in Gainesville my freshman year in law school. And the dean of the school told me I was crazy, and he said, George, why don't you wait and see if you're going to make it before you invest in a house in Gainesville? And I said, failure is not an option, Professor. We will make it. And so we bought a house in Gainesville, and I matriculated there, and there were over 20,000 students at the university campus when I entered in 1960. I was the only black. At that time, Florida had no black football players, so they were losing most of their games. They had no black basketball players. They had no black anything except one black student, and I played giveaway checkers. So, and even the stadium, Ben Hill Griffin Stadium, had 100 seats in the end zone for colored patrons. And I started a boycott on that, and I got some blacks that agreed to go to the games with me, and I would take them to the football games, and we'd sit on the 50-yard line. And a lot of the folks would get really upset about the colored folks coming in here sitting in white seats. And so I organized it, and we got to the point where we had so many of them black folks coming to the University of Florida sports events that they finally integrated sports in Gainesville. Theaters were segregated, and I got the youth chapter of the NAACP that I organized, and we did sit-ins at the theaters. Restaurants were segregated. We took the youth chapter to the Primrose Grill, which was one of the finest restaurants in Gainesville, owned by the mayor of Gainesville. And we sat in, demanded service, and he finally gave us service. And he said, George, you know, why would you hurt me? You know, I support you. And I said, you know, we start with you, and the rest of your friends will know we mean business. So I had integrated theaters, restaurants, while a student at the University of Florida. But then, and I was taking full hours, full courses, because I knew that I had to hurry up and get out of there because I was getting threats on my life. And it was educationally strenuous, but I studied all the time. I slept every other day. So by the summer of 1962, I needed 10 hours to graduate because I'd taken full load. So I told the wife, I said, you know, I got to get out of here. I'm now a senior because we have a trimester program. I can graduate in December of '62. And there are no blacks here. Me graduating as the only black from the University of Florida would mean nothing if there is no second black there. So I went out and I recruited throughout the state of Florida, and I lied. I told the parents and the students that the University of Florida had sent me to let everyone know that they were open to blacks and that they wanted blacks to attend and they wanted blacks to apply, and I had a handful of applications, and I helped them fill out the applications, and I came back to the school and I submitted the applications, and as a result of all of the recruitment, 9 black students were admitted to the University of Florida in September of 1962, my senior year. Incidentally, Charlene Holmes and who's now Charlene Galt and Hamilton Holmes, Charlene Hunter was admitted, she and Hamilton were admitted to the University of Georgia as the first black students to enter the University of Georgia, and that was 1962. James Meredith in September of 1962 was admitted to University of Mississippi. I met them, I knew them, I counseled them, but they were freshmen my senior year in law school. So they entered in September 1962, and I started my senior year, my last of my senior year, in September of 1962, and I graduated in December of 17th, 1962. So I was the first African-American to graduate from a previously white school in the South. And this was December 17, 1962. It happened that Charlene and Hamilton continued their education, and they graduated from University of Georgia much later. And also, James Meredith graduated from the University of Mississippi much later. I left Gainesville and moved to Miami, Florida, and I started practicing law with a law firm called Orr and Kaplan, and we were the first integrated law firm south of Washington, D.C. But integration was hard because they paid me $75 a week. They paid me a colored salary, and I couldn't shop at the colored section of Winn-Dixie, so I quit. And I moved to Fort Lauderdale and opened my own office. And I practiced here from, I guess, December of 1963 until I retired 3 years ago after 50 years of service. So I retired in 2013. So during the time that I practiced law, I filed many cases desegregating housing, education, and public accommodations, restaurants, hotels. But one of the cases in 1969, I filed a case called Allen versus Broward County School Board because Broward County School Board was segregated. Now they allowed some blacks to go to white schools under some kind of choice program. You could ask to go, and I did that with my sons Fred and Tim. And they were two of the plaintiffs in that lawsuit. And when I called the superintendent's office here in Broward County and asked, I'm new in town, I want to know where I have two boys, one's in 3rd grade, one's in 4th grade. Where do they go to school? And they said, what color are they? And I said, none of your business. We live at this address, where do we go to school? And so they said, well, it depends on whether you're black or white. And I said, no, it doesn't. The Supreme Court has ruled that segregation is unconstitutional. They will go to the school they're assigned to, or I will file a lawsuit. This was in 1963. So they allowed Fred and Tim to enroll in the school that everyone else lived in that community, and it was a community of mostly whites. We were only black people in that community. But it was real close to the black community. And so they went to this school, and there were a lot of other blacks that used choice to go to the school of their choice, or their parents' choice. But segregation was just rampant. There were no blacks working downtown in the superintendent's office except maids, and they had a few people that were designated in charge of colored education that were really monitoring black students and black schools and black workers. And even the janitors were white in the white schools and black in the black schools. Secretaries, everybody was segregated. And so in 1969, after bickering with the school board, I filed Allen versus versus Broward County. And we had an emergency hearing, and the federal judge, Judge Cabot, who lived in Plantation, he, because I had a good case and I presented a good case, and the other lawyers had nothing. He ruled in our favor that they must integrate all the schools in Broward County, but to do so right away would cause harm. And I said, what do you mean harm? They've never done it before. So I appealed Judge Cabot's decision to, at that time, the 5th Circuit Court of Appeals, which was the next court above I was in federal court in Miami. And the federal court it was in New Orleans at the time. They ruled in my favor and said, Allen wins, but you're taking the win away from him by prolonging when integration will take place in Broward County. So in 1970, when they ruled, they asked me to send them a map and one map of the black community and one map of all the black schools in Broward County. And Judge Brown, who was the judge at that time, entered an order to integrate every black school in Broward County. And I had asked for, in the percentages that would allow no school in Broward County to take a picture and you could look at the picture of the student body and determine whether it was a black school or a white school. And no faculty could be denoted as black or white. No janitorial staff could be denoted as black or white. I was a very unpopular person in Broward County. And I received a lot of threats, and they were talking about, you know, your business is going to suffer, and I just laughed at them. Because I had a lot of white clients, I had a lot of Jewish clients, I had a lot of black clients. So one group wouldn't hurt. So I laughed at them, and I kept working, and so I did what I wanted to do. Unfortunately, Judge Cabot died, and he hated my guts. And they buried him at a Catholic church right up there off Broward Boulevard. And at that time, I had a yellow Rolls Royce, and I went to the family's home and drove behind the family to the church, and I got out and I had on a white suit, and I walked into the church and I grabbed Mrs. Cabot's hand and I says, I am going to miss your husband. He was a great man. And she looked at me like she would die. and so the lawyer told me, he says, you are crazy. But anyway, he ruled against me, but I got revenge. I outlived him. As a result of that case, the federal courts ordered that I must monitor education in Broward County on a yearly basis and signify to the federal court whether the school board of Broward was in compliance with the order of the federal court to desegregate higher education. So for 20 years, I monitored the progress of the Broward County School Board. And Ed Marco was the school board attorney at the time. So every bad decision, every time he had to tell a white parent that they couldn't take their kid out of a white school, a black school, a predominantly black school, they put it in a white school, he said, it's because of George Allen. So, I mean, a lot of parents hated my guts too because they used me as a scapegoat when they didn't want, when they couldn't resegregate the schools. Unfortunately, that's what we've done now. I finally got tired of the monitoring after over 25 years of kind of being the bad man. I said, the heck with this. So I quit that case. Because after all, you know, it was not a lifetime case. I had other cases. So I quit that case, and unfortunately, what you see now in Broward County is a result of lack of monitoring. And not only in Broward County, it's throughout the South. That winning Brown versus Board of Education, at that time, to stop separate but equal schools, which are really never equal, is going back. And we're now operating an educational system that, because of charter schools that say the states will give money to parents that don't want their kids to go to a certain school because they're inferior. It's taking money away from the rest of the educational system. I fought charter schools. I still don't like them. I think that people came to me and wanted me to help them get a charter school. And I said, that's a segregated school. City of Sunrise wanted to start an educational system, but the state constitution said that there should be one educational system per county run by the superintendent of schools of the county. So it was illegal to do it. But they finally, the Florida legislature and legislatures throughout the South started these charter schools And Jeb Bush was one of the big proponents. And he was dead wrong then, he's dead wrong now to push him, because it's made education so bad here in the state of Florida. Not only in high schools, in elementary schools, in public education, but in colleges and universities. We spend not enough money to take care of the students of the state of Florida. Now, I've done a lot of other cases. I've done murder cases. I've done, the last case I tried, I represented a boat builder from Shanghai, China, called Shanghai Bao Dao, that got sued in Broward County because of the gel coating around the boat. It was a $2 million yacht. And so I told the president of the company, the boat was built in Shanghai, China, and I said, my wife and I would like to come over so I can study the gel coating system at your plant, and I'll have to stay there a week. And so I went over, and my wife and I stayed in Shanghai for a week, and we studied gel coating 2 months before the trial. And so I came back and I tried the case, I won it, and then I retired. But I had a great time in Shanghai, China. Any questions? Yes. Huh? I didn't understand you. How's my day? What? Stand up. Speak loudly. No, I want to hear it. I want to answer you.
How was your day today?
How's my day today?
Yes.
How's my day today? It's great. It's great. I get to come out and see all you youngsters. Yeah. Where I live now, a lot of old folk. So it's good. Yeah, and I'm retired, so, I don't see a lot of youngsters. Yes.
Okay, this is kind of a personal question. Because, okay, do you know like a Michael Allen or like a Hattie Allen? Because it's like, I feel like you're like might be a distant family member because my last name is Allen.
Okay, well, my father's family grew up in Georgia. But so I don't know, but you know what they say, all black folk are 10th cousins. So hello, cuz. Yes.
In the face of such adversity, where did you rise? Where did you find the strength to be able to push on in the face of such adversity?
Well, I have always, the question is where did I find the strength to push on through the adversity? But I've always been a little wild, and some folks say a little crazy, and fearless. I don't have no one to determine limitations. That I never acknowledged limitations. When I graduated from Florida A&M University, and I was commissioned a second lieutenant in the U.S. Army. In Army Intelligence, in the PMS&T, which was the Professor of Science and Military Tactics, at FAMU said, we've never had a black that I recommended to Army Intelligence. He says, it's going to be very competitive. They only take the top 10%. But Alan, you can do it. And I said, yeah, you're right. Okay, sir. Colonel Day. So I went up to Baltimore, Maryland, at the Army Intelligence Center, and I entered. There were 125 students, one black, 3 Southerners, 2 good old boys, one from University of Mississippi and one from some college in Georgia. And the bulk of the students were from Harvard and Yale. And I wrote Colonel Day, and I says, you were right. They say only the top 10% will pass. And he said, Alan, you can do it. And I said, so I buckled down and I studied. And when they put up the listing of people who were in the top 10%. The two good old Southern boys punched out, and I was among the top 10%. And that gave me a good feeling that I had never attended a school with whites. But it gave me the feeling that I could compete, and that there were some dumb white folk, and there were some smart white folk, some dumb black folk, some smart black folk. But you gotta study, and you gotta persevere and work hard. You try to be in that top 10%. Yeah.
There's been a resurgence of black activism these days, and because we feel that the struggle continues, what advice would you have to this new generation of those that want to continue that legacy of the fight for social justice?
I went to a museum this weekend up in Cocoa. They discovered in a bog, which is an area with water and muck, human remains. And they excavated this area and stopped the construction there. And they found people in Florida that were 7,000 to 8,000 years old. The history of the United States is that we were discovered by Columbus, and Florida was discovered by Ponce de Leon, which is crap. But nobody writes about the discovery of Native Americans that lived here 7,000 to 8,000 years ago. There's an old saying that in the hunt, when lions are hunted by hunters, if lions do not have their historian, the written history will always say that the hunters won. It will never say that the lions ate up the hunters, because they don't have historians. We need historians like you to remember what is happening in our society. Talk to your parents and grandparents and ask them about how things were in the olden days. That's what my grandkids say. The olden days. Things are really reverting around to as bad as they were before we started the integration fight. And people seem to feel that it's okay to be racist, to be nasty, to be caustic, and be like Donald Trump, which is wrong. So you're right, things are going back. And I don't have an answer of how to stop it, but I know that we must always write our history so we know where we came from and where we're going. And be vigilant about righting all the wrongs of society, because there's still a lot of them. A lot of them have not gotten better, they've gotten worse. Yes, ma'am.
So, what do you feel about the representation of the black community today? How did you feel when a person that after the Donald Trump nomination happened, the person that spoke wasn't like a historian speaker, or wasn't like a person that you will picture as another Martin Luther King? It was like T.I.
Who are you talking about specifically?
Like for the black community, I feel like there's a lack of representations of historians for the black community, and now like the rapper T.I. was the first person that spoke for the black community.
She means like an advocate, like a Malcolm Martin Stokely type figure.
I don't know, there were a lot of blacks that did speak in favor of Hillary. She had a big black following. Unfortunately, she used the Obama model, hoping and thinking that blacks would come out in the same numbers that for her that they came out for Barack, which didn't happen. She didn't have that kind of appeal. Also, her husband had a weird attitude, like he didn't want his wife to win. Now, there are a lot of white men and black men that don't like strong women and will vote against them, and that's what Hillary also ran into that buzzsaw, the men that didn't want a strong woman leading this country. Also, Bill had no right to go get on the plane with Loretta Lynch, the Attorney General, when his wife is under an investigation. I mean, that hurt. And then he made a speech that he was against Obamacare. He really campaigned against his wife. I lost all respect for him. And that old crap about he was the first black president is a lie. He's the one that filled up the jails with black people. With that, oh yeah. With the drug cases that gave double the penalty for crack as for powder, because they said crack was more addictive, and that's crap. Heroin is, I mean not heroin, cocaine is cocaine. But powder was used by whites more than the crack by black. Cracks were used by blacks because it's cheaper. But he put people in jail for double the time. I mean, Bill Clinton was not a nice person. Of course, Hillary had her faults too, but I still wanted her. I didn't want Trump to be the one picking Supreme Court justices, because the way Scalia and Thomas say that we must interpret the Constitution of the United States as it originally was written, which is crazy, because when it was originally written, black folk were not given, we were not persons. Women didn't have the right to vote. They want to go back to that point? No. It's crazy. But that's what Trump says he's going to do. Yes, sir.
What are your opinions on the electoral college should be abolished?
Well, I have mixed feelings. The reason it was set up was because we didn't know. At that time, when it was set up, rich white landowners controlled the votes, and they were the only ones allowed to vote. Now we have popular votes, and for the Gore Bush election, Gore had more popular votes than Bush, and he lost. And in this race, Clinton has over 2 million, over 2.5 million votes, larger than popular votes than Trump, and she's been declared a loser. So I think it must be looked at, but the reason they set it up was to keep the rich people that owned slaves, and slaves couldn't vote, and they were just taken advantage of. All the women that Thomas Jefferson raped. He had a whole family. Sally Heming had a whole black family for him. And he took her to Paris when he was an ambassador to Paris. Was not a nice person. And they talk about how great and glorious Thomas Jefferson was. I don't agree. All of them got a lot of bad skeletons in their closets. And that's the reason the Electoral College was set up. Because otherwise, the white gentry, men, male gentry, would have controlled everything. Of course, and they're about doing it now too. So we got to rework it, but how, I just don't know. Any other questions?
Right here.
Yes. Yes, sir. Speak up.
How would you compare the society from 1960s and 70s till now?
How would I what now?
Compare to society.
Compare to society. In the 60s, I think people were more militant because we were coming into a period where rights were being extended. And we had more militant young fighters, like Rap Brown, Stokely Carmichael, and a lot of activists that were out there fighting. Now, you know, the kids talk about basketball and football all the time, you know. And I'm not a sports person. The only reason I went to games at University of Florida was because they didn't want blacks to go to the game. And one old guy that was in law school with me said, "I'll never sit in a stadium with a nigger." And I went to him in the law library, and I says, "Buddy, I understand you said you're not going to any games with a nigger." He said, "Yeah." And I said, "How much time do you have here?" He said, 2 years. And I said, "Well, you can kiss going to games goodbye." I said, "I don't even like football, but I'm going to every game just to keep your butt home." And after about 3 games, he came to me and he says, "You know, I've watched you and you're okay. And I don't think it'd be bad for me to sit with you at the game." So I said, "Fine, where are you sitting?" And we, at that time, the law students were in charge of seating on the 50-yard line because they had cards that they would flip and spell out things. So I sat next to him. At the time, Gainesville was a dry county, meaning you couldn't buy liquor in Alachua County. So you had to go down, and all the students would go down to Marion County and Ocala and buy liquor, or go to the Palatka and buy liquor, and we bring it all in the stadium. And old Buddy Macklin was his name. Buddy was sitting next to me, and he reaches in his hip pocket, he pulls out his pint of bourbon, and he said, "You drink?" And I said, "Yeah." So he took a swig of it, got a cup, and gave me the cup and gave me the bottle. I looked at the cup, I wiped off the top, and turned his bottle up and took a swig. And he said, "You don't have to do that." I said, "Do what?" "You don't have to drink out of my bottle." I said, "You gave it to me." He said, "Oh hell." He wiped it and took another swig. So he was my good friend after that. Fortunately, he became a judge in Lake County, in Tavares, Florida, of all places, where the Groveland case, where the sheriff had shot blacks in the back. And his reputation was that he would put on cowboy boots to kick blacks' butt. And Buddy became a judge there. But it was an awful time. But in the 70s, we knew who the enemy was. And we knew who we had to fight. And we were better organized to fight. The churches were more active in civil rights. Now they're active in who can build the biggest one. So it was a different era. So now we've gotten lazy, and we need to return to the time when we're trying to secure the rights of people who are less fortunate. And we should join forces with the Hispanics and women, because there are a lot of causes that need work. And we're depending on you youngsters to help us. I'm 80 years old now. So you don't expect me to get out there and march anymore. In fact, I'm what now? Really? Yeah. Yeah, I was born in 1936. So you guys have to do the marching. I'm too old to march. Anybody else? Yes.
So, that being said, do you feel like Black Lives Matter is an effective movement to make progress?
Say what now?
With what you just said, do you feel like Black Lives Matter is an effective movement to make progress?
Yes. Black Lives Matter arose out of situations where whites took advantage of blacks and were going to do nothing about it. And as a result of what happened in Missouri, the police chief in that town in Missouri is now a black officer from Miami. I think his name is Derrick Ross. But they have changed the whole police system in this little town. and also they're better trained. They were just a vigilante that went around beating up, shooting, and arresting blacks, and blacks were paying for the governance of the town on the backs of paying fines. I mean, it was a disgrace. And Black Lives Matter brought all that to the forefront and caused change. And they're still doing it. And yes, I agree with Black Lives Matter. Yes.
Do you believe that this generation is being lazy now?
Lazy? Yeah, I agree they are. They are not involved. They're not involved. You need to put down those cell phones and quit and quit texting and go to work. There are a lot of places that need help, need work. Volunteer in your churches, in your schools. Yes, we do need work. Yes, ma'am.
Do you think that social media has helped or hurt like activism in like the way of like Black Lives Matter becoming more like a hashtag? Some people are actually going out and like marching and advocating for it.
Yes, I agree. Social media. A lot of folks believe anything they read, like the stuff that Donald Trump sends out. There's no fact check on it. And 99% of the things Donald Trump says Texas are lies. So social media, if you are not a thinking person, and you read where Martin Luther King returns from the dead, if you write that in social media, it doesn't mean it happened. And a lot of folks really believe that what they receive in a text has some truth, which is not true. And so we're not really watching what we send and what we receive. Yes.
What do you think Supreme Court decisions are going to be like for a while, now that we know that Donald Trump is going to be appointed justices?
It's going to be awful. It got so bad when the Rehnquist court and Scalia went in. I stopped filing federal cases. This is 15 years ago, maybe 20. And a lot of lawyers that believed in the federal courts stopped filing cases in federal courts because the court became activists. They became bought and paid for by the conservative money, the Koch brothers and all those that are financing campaigns. So I stopped filing federal cases. I would take my chance in state court because the judges have to run for re-election. And if they screw a lawyer, they gotta see that lawyer when they run. And lawyers are the only ones that contribute to judicial education, judicial races of everyone in the community. People, they still call me and says, look, which judge should I vote for? So you can really have some control over state court. There was a very disturbing article in the Miami Herald today that the Speaker of the House of Florida is attacking the Supreme Court justices of Florida because they were ruling against the craziness that Scott and the Republican House and Senate's doing. So, because they don't like the decisions go against them, they want to now term limit them to 12 years, which is crazy. They got to do it by constitutional amendment, but the way elections are going in Florida, with Trump winning Florida and Rubio getting back in the Senate, anything can happen in Florida.
I didn't know that part. Oh.
Anything. So you got to be very careful. Yes.
Mr. Allen, do you think that anything was lost as a consequence of integration in Broward County?
Nothing was lost. we have created a cadre of people working in education. We never would have had a black superintendent of public education without integration. Black members of the school board, it was never a thought that they would happen. The number of black, Hispanic, and kids, Haitian, all the other kids that are in our school system now, it's a cornucopia of people, races, from all over the world here. So it's better. Can it be improved? Yes. But we are at a stage now where we are educating more people, we're sending more to college, and things are much better now. Students have hope that they can achieve and do anything they want to do. You look at the list of students here that are now going to Harvard, Yale, all of the schools all over the place. And from Broward County, didn't happen before integration. Yes? Nothing else? Yes?
Did you cry when Barack Obama became president?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did. I never thought I'd see the day, and I sat before the television and boo-hooed. And I'm not ashamed to say it. And I'm probably gonna boo-hoo when he goes out too. Because he has really done a great job. He has a great family. We've never had a president to serve 8 years and leave with no scandal. I mean, even his kids are great. His wife is beautiful and great and smart. You know, and he is smart. I mean, he is brilliant. He's really a brilliant young man. And so, yes. And history will prove that he really helped us. He took over when we were the economy was tanked. We were going to lose all of the automobile business in the United States. Banks were in bad shape. I mean, he saved our butts. And people are walking around talking about how badly he did, and Trump now is going to make America great again. Is he a fool or what? We have never been this great. The stock market hasn't been this good in years.
He saved us from the next Great Depression.
Huh?
He saved us from the second Great Depression.
Yes, he did. So hold your hats. Because you got a guy coming in that really has no clue about governance. Yes?
Do you believe that this generation is kind of undermining what they can do?
You say undermining, you mean undermining?
Oh, undermining.
I don't think they're undermining what they can do. They just gotta get a purpose. You just don't go out there helter-skelter. We knew who the enemy was when I was in high school. And we fought them. You guys don't know who the enemy is. You don't know who to fight. And that's one of the big problems. It's not black versus white. It's not black versus Hispanics. It's not Native Americans versus Haitians or Jamaicans and everything. All of us, we are in a common tent, and we must help each other. And that's one of the big problems. You know, no one knows what to fight for or who to fight against.
Do you believe that because of the education that we have, that the lack of education that we have for the black community is why most protests end up in riots, and why most students talk too much?
No, riots occur when governments allow them to happen. In Fort Lauderdale, my office has always been near the courthouse because that's where the business is. And I bought a building down there in the late 60s, block and a half from the courthouse. The people started protests in the northwest section of Fort Lauderdale. The police department cordoned off, put squad cars around the community and says, let them tear their houses up and their businesses up. You couldn't get downtown because they'd shoot you. They had tanks. So riots occur where they're allowed to occur. When you're not going to have any riots at the mayor's house, or as we used to say, in White Town. They don't happen there because White Town is protected, and the black neighborhoods are not. And that's one of the whole things about Black Lives Matter. People don't admit what the real reason is. They are not protected. Yes, sir. Huh? Oh, I don't, it's not one person or one entity or one, Right now, Trump is.
Yeah.
But, yes.
You mentioned the riot in Sistrunk in the northwest area of Fort Lauderdale. What sparked that riot that you were talking about with the tanks and they cordoned it off and let the whole Sistrunk?
They were widening Sistrunk and they had left some of the heavy machinery out there. And some guy got one of the heavy machines and hot-wired it, excuse me, and went up and down Sistrunk Boulevard and would dart in and knock the front window off buildings, businesses, and they'd go in and loot. Now, rather than go in and arrest them, and at the time, my family had a dashiki store. Anybody, know what dashikis are? Yeah. And we sold the African dashikis. And they came to my store. Some of the folks were standing outside with signs about black owned. And I started to go down there with my gun and my sign, and my wife said, "Are you out of your mind? That's property. Don't go down there. Don't do that." So they broke into my place. But the police didn't come in and catch them and stop them. They allowed them to go. But that's how it started. Started with people, some little hoods, the thugs that started stealing. And they allowed them to steal and tear up the black community.
What year was that? Remember?
It was in the 70s.
And I heard from Dr. Osgood a few years ago that riot, that looting and everything really destroyed the economic district there.
That and urban renewal. Because what happened is that the city fathers determined that they needed the near northwest. And they took a lot of business and businesses, bought them and said they were going to put houses back and didn't. And a lot of it was sold to white developers. So that happens a lot. Same thing in Miami it happened, where they put I-95 right through the viable black community, where they had restaurants, hotels, nightclubs, everything, and just destroyed that whole vibrant business community. And it happens there. Jacksonville, same way. Yes.
Do you feel like after all this time, like with desegregation for a long time, do you feel like people have not appreciated like the fight that went on to have desegregation?
Yes, I agree. That's why I say we need our historian. Or the hunter will always say he won the fight with the lion, because he's controlling the history and the written history. So yes, we do. We have to. We have to tell our story and advocate.
Have you ever had, like, what was the closest you ever got to just quitting and leaving university? Just being with the old classes?
Never.
Never.
It meant too much to so many people in the state of Florida. Yeah, my parents, my dad couldn't read or write. I tried to teach him, and he said, I don't need to read and write. I got you. And I would go downtown once a month to pay our bills. And the high sheriff was Jack Hickson. I must have been 10 or 11 years old. All able-bodied blacks had to work in the fields in Sanford when I was growing up. And I would go downtown and I'd get stopped by the sheriff and says, boy, what are you doing downtown on a work day? Why are you not in the fields working? And I said, my parents sent me down to pay their bills. And they would question me before allowing me to go home. Yeah, I grew up, Sanford was the celery capital of the world. And in the wintertime was when we harvested celery. The black schools were closed in the winter in order to allow the farmers to have workers. Sometimes they open in the summer, not all the time. So education for blacks was not something that was looked upon with favor. The education of blacks was not looked upon with favor.
Now, that was similar to what happened here in Broward at Dillard, where they would stop the school year in between or do like split sessions so the children can go out into the fields and work.
The bean fields down here.
Correct.
Yes, it happened, and another organization I represented when I got to town was the migrant workers of Florida farm workers, and because I'd been one, and so I represented them. I was the president of the migrant workers for years, and then I was one of their lead attorneys to file suits against all the workers out in U.S. Sugar and all the companies that they would pay the government, our federal government would go to Jamaica and pay the government of Jamaica to send workers up to Florida to cut sugar cane. And they would come up and stay in labor camps, and they had to buy their groceries, their liquor and everything from the labor camp. And so, and they had no help. It was awful, and I sued them. I filed suit I also integrated schools in Hendry County, in Clewiston. I filed that lawsuit also. And I also sued the hospital that wouldn't allow blacks to attend the hospitals in Hendry County. And then we set up a housing area. They had outdoor toilets, and I'd grown up with them, and so I sued the U.S. Sugar because they had this camp with these outdoor toilets. And we took the land, they gave it to us in order to stop the lawsuit, 126 acres. And we built 111 housing units on that land, and they're there now. I fish a lot, so I go back through there sometimes. And I'm paid with fish, rabbits, coons, possums, and wild hogs sometimes. So they didn't pay me money because they didn't have any money. So I'm still getting paid when I go back over there.
Well, thank you very much for coming out here and speaking to us. As you know, we've been recording you, and I just want to make sure that we have your permission to use it.
You do.
Thank you.
All right.
All right.
If you make a movie, make sure that,
Get you 10%.
yeah.
We got it. Alright. If anybody would like to, would you mind if we take some photos with you?
Oh, no problem.
If any of you guys would like to take a photo with Mr. Allen, just come up. Otherwise.